Right.
Okay. Michelle Haverstick, are you on the call too? We're going to get going here because I know that all the Twin Falls people I invited, they came up to our road show, so they're either skiing or on their way back, so they're not going to join us. And, this one was a little bit tight just because we've had all the road shows, and I had mine this morning, so we're just going to squeeze some things in here. But I really it's come up a lot here in Sun Valley. I think a low inventory is going to create more and more of these situations of multiple offers and situations where an agent is going to find him or herself in a moment where they're like, dude, this is unique, and I got to figure out how to do this. So, of course, we want all of our agents to be able to outshine the others in their negotiation skills. So Keith is going to start us out by talking a little bit about the multiple offer situation, but clearly with the experience on the call, especially from Steve, Kim, and Kelly, we'll look for and Michelle, we'll look for your insights as well as to how to handle multiple offer situations, both with your buyer as well as from a selling standpoint, because they're a little bit different, is what I've read when I study real estate, because I'm not a real estate agent, although I play one on Zoom conferences. I know. Kelly, you're like, I'm almost going to half smile for that. So, okay.
You could stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, at least. Change it up some.
I'll work on it. Maybe next week. Maybe next week you'll get a different one from me. Okay, so we'll go ahead and jump in. Keith, why don't you just sort of start us off here with some thoughts about it, and then let's talk about it first from the buyer standpoint, because that's certainly what I'm seeing in my market is more of my agents are working with buyers who are all of a sudden making multiple offer situations. So let's jump in.
Okay, first thing I want to start with is something from the Code of Ethics, which obligates realtors to be honest with all parties, to present offers and counteroffers quickly and objectively, and to cooperate with other brokers. Cooperation involves sharing of relevant information. So to start off with, this is something that is covered in the Code of Ethics, and you have to do this from a professional point of view. I mean, Steve and I have been talking about this, arguing back and forth about some different stuff, discussing stuff, and one of the things that Steve talks about, if you want to say it, about assuming the other guy's an honest real estate or realtor on the other side. So we've gone through a lot of discussion about this, but from the buyer side, who's been in a seller's market where there are multiple offers and really constricted inventory?
Good.
Yeah, so Kelly and I were in one together over in Denver. I think, you weren't there when the market changed, were you?
I was, yeah.
You're okay. So in 2008, just to give you some perspective, there were 42,000 homes on the market in the greater Denver area. In 2015, there were 2,500, 5% of the height of the market.
What?
And we saw a lot of, with buyers, people going crazy, writing, offers above, having to bring cash because the house isn't going to appraise for what they're buying it for. So when you're talking to your buyers from the very beginning, you need to be talking to them about the potentiality of having multiple offers. You will be competing. It's always great to have in your tool belt somebody's, if you don't have an experience, somebody's experience in your office that had somebody go in and failed to get the house they wanted because they didn't come up with a really powerful offer. We had a guy in here, Paul Zirk, who's not on here today. He's out at a listing, that did this yesterday. They went in on a $249,000 property and offered $260,000 and lost it. So you need to be having the conversation with your buyers to be preparing them for what would happen in a multiple offer situation. What the sellers can do is they can accept the best offer. They can counter any offer and keep the others waiting. They can counter and reject the other offers, or they can, and it's different practices in different areas, and we'll talk about this on the seller side. They can also do a highest and best request. Now, one of the things I know that we faced in Denver is people, there are a lot of brokers there, so they don't have, the tight niche realtor associations like we do with the smaller numbers, and they don't care if they piss off the other agent, and they would create bidding wars. And people, if you do that in our markets, you probably are going to, have some repercussions, for yourself as an agent down the road.
Yeah.
So talking about that, offers are not confidential. So per the seller's request, they can share this with the buyers as much information as they want to about what the other offers are. And, the buyer needs to understand that, yes, their goal is to get the best price for this house and the best terms. And that's your job as a buyer's agent. But as a seller's agent, their job is to get the most money and the best terms for their sellers. So when you're competing here, having Steve's attitude of you're dealing with a professional on the other side, have a good relationship with them, be open, honest, fair with the other agent. Sometimes they will take an offer that isn't the highest or the best terms because they know the agent on the other side of the deal. So always have that in mind when you are getting pissed off at the agent on the other side for some reason. So you're not a party to the contract. You don't get in that emotional elevator going up and down with the buyers or with the sellers. You stay in the lobby and you be professional. And what I want you to do when you get to that point where you're very frustrated is go talk to somebody, walk around the building, let it go. You need to get the best deal you can for your buyer or for your seller. I have heard agents say that that's unethical to do highest and best or to disclose other offers. That is not true. Ethics does not prohibit such disclosures. So if you're a buyer's agent and they're doing that to you, just be prepared for it because that's a standard practice. I'm going to jump over real quick to escalation clauses. If you get in a situation
Just for a buyer, right? You're talking for a buyer getting into a
yes,
situation.
still on the buyer side.
Okay.
Yes. So thank you for that. An escalation clause is a great tool to use if you think you're going to be going into a multiple offer situation, or if you get the request from the listing agent, I've got other offers, come in and give me your highest and best offer. So I'm going to break my word. Steve and I had a little discussion yesterday. We had Olin Clark, who's been an employing broker. He's run this office before, who is incredibly talented and wise, has an escalation clause that's about this long. There's a lot of moving parts in it. And Steve has one that is very brief and to the point. And I like some of the stuff from Olin's that I would like to put in Steve's. And I sent it to Karen, and Karen said, no, leave Steve's the way it is. So Steve was right.
Because it's better, or because it's Steve's? Like, why is Karen saying this one's better?
Okay, so I'll read this to you, and I'll get it to you, Derek, and you can get it out to anybody. Buyer will increase their purchase price by X amount over any competing offer. Buyer will go up to X amount. Listing agent must provide pertinent pages of other offer as proof of competing offer at the time of accepting this offer.
Okay.
So the three things. One is we will go up this amount over any competing offer. If those guys have an escalation clause too, then they can do the same thing. I go 500 over them, they go 500 over me, 500. I will go up to this amount though. So $200,000, buyer will increase the purchase price by $500 over any other competing offer. Buyer will go up to $205,000, $207,000. And you got to prove to me that there's another offer on the table. So those are the three components to the escalation clause. And the thing that Olin and I like is that we wanted to know the concessions on the other side. So that's a pertinent part of the competing offer to see what the concessions are, because they could show the price of being $5,000 higher, but they have $8,000 in closing costs that they won't cover. So then it's not a better offer. They're just trying to get us to jack our price up. Everybody comfortable with that?
Okay.
Sorry, I'm interrupting.
Please.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go back to the concessions, how you word that.
We don't put it in there. I wanted it in there. You can put it in there. And
you don't need to. It's already in there. It's in the contract. It's in the contract.
See, now, I am of the mind, I would like to say in there that the less concessions.
That's sloppy. No, the purchase price will go up to this amount, and then you have concessions. So blah, 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 because what happens, you have to look at the whole offer. It's not just concessions. It could be personal property that they're putting in there. It could be many, many things. What are you going to do? Address every single thing in your escalation clause? It's already in the contract.
So what you're saying,
let's say I make an offer and I want the $10,000 super duper personal spa that's in the backyard that was excluded.
Yeah.
You understand? So concessions is one part, but there's also other things part of the offer that you have to look at. I'm just addressing where my price is. If you can't read the offer and look at every single item and do a little thing and saying this equals that. There you go.
So what you're trying to do, hold on, let me just, because my dumb brain is in full high gear, low gear today. What you're saying, Steve, is the less you put in there, the cleaner it is, because you don't tie yourself to other stuff. So all you're talking about in your language, Steve, is price and a limit. It's almost like a stock thing, or I'm going to sell once it hits a certain point. I will stop at this point. Okay,
Yeah.
great. And what you're also saying, I'm new to the business here, you're saying that the concessions is already stated somewhere else in the contract.
Not just the concessions, but all the other items that
personal property.
So I would just be muddying my best and highest by putting it in there. Okay, great.
So now the one thing, if you want to keep it simple like this, as Steve does, and I highly urge you to do, is you call the other agent and you educate them on what you mean by this, and I will expect to see the pages that cover that portion when we have a executed contract.
Okay, and this is only if you enter into an escalation clause, which doesn't always happen in a multiple offer situation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this is a thing, agents, that you would. It's like an offshoot. Okay, we're in a multiple offer situation. Here's what an escalation clause looks like, and you would articulate these things. You would have Steve's language at the ready, or a combination of Steve and Olin's, whatever. But it's not an automatic, is what I'm hearing. This could happen, but it's not how you handle every multiple offer situation.
And talk to your broker when you do one of these for the first few times, and make sure that you're on track, because this is right there in that sketchy part of practicing law. So be very careful and get your broker or an employing broker in your offices or state's office to make sure that this is okay. Now,
Okay. Now,
and that's why I like mine, because I like it simple, not a lot of words.
Yeah.
Too many words get you in trouble.
I agree. So, Eric, I'm going to ask for a little insight from you. Eric is the owner of the Telluride, now the partner of the Telluride brokerage. And so, sorry, he's got probably as much experience as running an office, owning a brokerage as anyone. How does all this sound to you so far? And I know he joined a little late, but tell me what your thoughts are about this.
Well, I think we should have our corporate attorney draft the language, and that's the language that we should all use, because we can't practice law and generate our own paragraphs as additional provisions, right?
Okay, so are we talking about stuff we shouldn't even be talking about right now? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, no, I think we can totally talk about it, but I think a final additional provision in a contract that's an escalation clause needs to be drafted by or approved by an attorney. We really shouldn't be writing our own paragraphs as additional provisions.
This one has been approved by Karen. I'm not sure. She does want to talk to the attorney about it. In the meantime,
Karen's not good enough.
Yeah.
She is awesome and she has a ton of history, but the Real Estate Commission will require that it's signed off by an attorney, especially if our 300 brokers are going to use that occasionally. I think it's just that's important.
Okay. Let me ask. I don't mean to be interrupting here, but Kelly, I know you've done escalation clauses before, yes?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay, and so you're hearing, here's what you should say, here's what you should say, and then you're hearing Eric say, none of this works because it's not signed off by our attorney. What have you done?
I've used language similar to what Keith and Steve are talking about. I think the disagreement between Keith and Steve is Keith's looking at the net he's looking at it from a seller perspective. The seller wants to know what their net is on it. If you're representing the buyer, if the seller misses the fact that there were concessions, then whatever, the seller misses it. I mean, it's part of the contract. So their agent didn't do their job in showing that to them.
Exactly.
As far as the attorney provided language, yes, there are some that Frescona's done also in the clauses on CTM, which is our Colorado contract software. I don't know if you guys have that other places or not. An easy workaround to that is not approved by attorney or something like that. And I've got the language somewhere underneath it. You know, this language has not been approved by attorney or the Colorado Real Estate Commission. So you can always add that in additional provisions.
Sort of as a
disclaimer
from being liable. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. What I have run into before though, and you just have to educate your buyers on the fact that this sort of does put all of their cards on the table. It tells the seller the highest that you're willing to pay for the property. And I have actually had other sellers counter back with that full price, even though that wasn't $100 or $1,000 or whatever over the next highest offer. And my buyer accepted it. I mean, they knew that when they made that offer, that was a possibility. And I educated them to that. I said, you know, there is a possibility we could get a counter back that has exactly your highest price on here. And we have had that happen before, and they took it. So
I said, let you be doing this. You're reading my notes for me.
sorry about
So
that.
Kelly,
That's
anyone
awesome.
can chime in on this. I don't mean to be picking on Kelly, but I know she's got a wealth of experience in both the Metro and the Grand Junction market. But when do you choose to go into an escalation clause? Is it up to the buyer? Or what makes you think, okay, this is a moment when we should do this, or this is just a moment when we should stay in as a multiple offer?
If you've already been notified that you're under a multiple offer situation, then you should absolutely do it. Of course, if your buyer wants to. I mean, you advise your buyer and ask them what they're comfortable with. Some buyers don't want to do competing offers. They just don't want to have anything to do with that. It stresses them out. So I've had buyers that once they find out there's a competing offer, they're out and they're off to the next property. Okay. The other time is if it just hit the market and you have your acceptance deadline noon tomorrow or something, or 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and you are fairly confident there's going to be other offers between now and then, it doesn't hurt anything to go ahead and put an escalation clause in, because it protects you based on whether or not there's other offers received and what that dollar amount is.
So you're saying you preempt, you do it preemptively almost if you think this listing is going to get a lot of attention.
Yep, it doesn't hurt to.
Does it help?
I think it can. Yeah, if you have a buyer who's highly motivated and wants to go in and they know they want this property, then you talk to them about this being an option and see whether or not it's something they want to do.
And I would bet it makes the seller's agent stand up even more to this offer because you've already brought something beyond just a single offer. So, Pam, I noticed your wry smile at something Kelly said. Did you have something you wanted to add or an experience that resonated with you, Pam?
Yeah, I've had a couple situations where I've had buyers that said they just walked. They just did not want to compete, and they waited to see how it would play, and either that worked to their advantage or it didn't, and we moved on to something else.
Okay. And
it was interesting to hear that somebody said, I'm not going to play.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And I'll get to you in a second, Eric. So the key here, and it's no surprise that Kelly and Pam are bringing this up because I think super highly of your abilities to communicate and to read your clients, is to know what they want and not to corner them into, I think the escalation clause would be best for you. If they want to walk, don't put them in that, because that'll bring out all sorts of lizard behavior from them because they're already shying away from things. So I really appreciate that angle. Like, this could work, but not for every client. So it's real estate 101. not everything works for every client, but in these situations where it's even more competitive, boy, you really got to read those signals. Mr. Fellinius?
Yeah, Keith, you have to wait. I'm next.
I got to get off the call in 7 minutes, though, and I've got two more things to say.
I surrender the floor to Keith.
Thank you.
The esteemed Keith.
Okay, no, let's don't go that far.
The esteemed Keith.
I was defeated by Shift yesterday. I'm not esteemed right now. So the one thing that you got to do is when you're talking to your buyers at the beginning of the process and your sellers at the beginning of the process, explain this to them from the beginning, because sometimes when you pop this on a buyer, they're going to feel like you're trying to trick them, or if you get to the seller and you have to describe this, you got 4 or 5 offers coming in from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 9 at night, and you want them to already be prepared for what's going to happen. So have the conversation with them when you get the listing, when you have your buyer consultation. And I hope you are doing buyer consultations and questionnaires and doing an in-depth listing questionnaire with your sellers as well at the beginning of the process. On a scale of 1 to 10, Derek, during this transaction, how honest do you want me to be with you?
That's great. This is probably an entire another mastermind, buyer consultations and seller consultations.
It is. But this conversation in a hot market has to be had then, not popping it on them later.
That's great.
What's going on in this market right now in Grand Junction? We had 232 houses in the last 7 days go under contract or closed, and we have 103 come on the market. Montrose, you're seeing some of the same stuff, Kelly. I'm sure any of the traditional markets up in Bozeman as well. I mean, this is going to happen to us for sure. And in those hot price points in the resort markets, it's going to happen to you guys too. And with all the snow everybody's getting, the weather we're getting, I think it's piling up. We're going to have a huge spring and early summer.
He said piling up. That's awesome. That's excellent. So all of this revolves around, thanks a lot, Keith. Really appreciate it. All of this revolves around communication, right? Everything that Kelly and Pam and Keith and Steve and Eric is talking about so far is about communication, clear communication with your client from the get-go. Hopefully clear communication from the other agent. And this is a piece I want to touch on a little bit later. How can we be sure that we're getting the real story from those other agents? Because I'm not always sure we are. So, but we have to make sure we are operating with clear communication. Eric, you can now take the floor from Mr. Gesture.
On now. So I think Keith made a good point in that we can't overestimate how little our buyers and our sellers understand about the business that we're in. I'm always amazed at the incredibly successful people that I work with in whatever business they're in, how little they know and understand about the real estate process and what goes into negotiating a deal. And one thing I wanted to say regarding our buyers who don't like to compete and want to step out of the fray, I think it's really important for them to understand that they should, at the very least, put their best foot forward with an offer. They don't have to be in a competitive position. They just do what works for them, what the number is that works for them, because there's nothing worse than when a client sees what a property closed for, and the next call is to you and they say, Eric, I can't believe it sold for that number. I would have paid that, right? So it's really important that we try to get them to at least make that one offer, whatever their best offer is, and then walk away from it. They don't have to be in a competitive situation.
Okay, let me ask you this, Eric. I'm a new agent, and you're advising me to bring my buyer's best offer to the table from the get-go. That goes against everything I've ever thought of in terms of real estate agent and like doing the best for your client.
No, it's only if you're in a competitive situation.
Well, how do I know if there's no offers or if I don't know yet?
Well, in that case, of course not. But, I always have to assume that a listing broker, if I'm representing a buyer, that a listing broker is being straightforward and honest with me when they say, I've received another offer. And often I'll ask them how they're going to deal with a second offer coming in, especially if I'm in a second position. You always want to know what the rules are, because there are any number of ways to negotiate a transaction where there are or may be multiple offers. I'll give you a couple of examples. About 2 years ago, I was in a transaction, did not know there was another offer. We made a very strong offer. It had some contingencies, and I got a call from the broker that they had received another offer and they had rejected ours without me ever having an opportunity to present a better offer. In that case, I felt that the broker had represented his seller very, very poorly. I came to learn that, yes, the second buyer was someone who knew the seller and so forth. So it was a little bit of a friendship transaction, and these things happen. And fortunately, I was able to hold on to my buyers and get them into another property. Sometimes they're so pissed off by the time they're done going through this frustrating process, they feel like they've been used and abused. So being able to hold on to them as buyers is important. I had another transaction here very recently that you, Derek, are familiar with. I listed a property on Wednesday. On Thursday, I had an open house for brokers. By Friday morning, I had 5 offers effectively at the asking price, with a few minor differences. And we chose to do a highest and best offer by 5 o'clock on Friday. And on Saturday morning, we decided on the buyer, and the contracts were about 3.6% apart from top to bottom, 0 to 21 days of due diligence. They were all basically a 3-week closing. And the tricky part is you want to make sure that all the brokers that are left out in the dust are okay with the process, that you handled it correctly, because there's always that chance that you're going to have to go back to them and get another buyer. This particular negotiation got so intense that the buyer who got it, his broker was worried that his client wasn't going to be able to get the transaction, and actually wanted to start renegotiating after we had taken all 5 offers. And I said, look, we're not going to do that, because that would mean that we'd have to reopen the negotiation to all 5 agents.
Yeah.
And, ultimately, he got it. I know I kept my fellow brokers in a good place. No one, they actually blamed their buyers for not stepping to the plate at a higher number and a better contract. So, I always want to make sure that my fellow brokers are okay with the process, because guess what? Your clients come and go over time, but our fellow brokers are always there. And there's a good chance that you're going to do a deal with them in the future, either on your listing or on their listing.
Yeah, and so, sometimes you lose the battle to win the war. I think that's really a good approach to that, Eric. This goes back again to that C word, communication. Eric was really clear with those other brokers about it, and so that helped him, and because he's going to run into those brokers again down the road, and you don't want any bad taste left in your mouth. I want to go back to a couple things, though, that Eric said, and someone can help me with this. First of all, the trust, and I've already said I want to talk about this. How do you know? What's the language you use? What's the script, if you will, of going to another agent who says they have another offer? There's someone on the call in my office who was in that situation a month ago and wasn't sure, I don't think, that the other agent actually had another offer. And we can talk all day about, you just speak honestly, but we can only control the agents in our office. So how do you go about substantiating? I love saying that word, so I say it slowly. Substantiating the fact that there's indeed another offer.
That is the nice thing about doing the acceleration clause, or just because you do ask to see the redacted contracts. And I think that is a benefit to doing that, a huge benefit.
So when you do that, then it automatically puts that into action. The other agent can't weasel and ferret and muskrat around.
Mhm. If it goes into the acceleration, yes.
Yeah. Escalation or acceleration?
It's both. It's called both.
Don't do that to me, man. My brain's only this big. I need to have one word for this. Escalation, I think of it as.
Hey,
Okay.
can I ask a question?
Of course.
One thing I need to remind, this is me reminding myself that I just wanted to vocalize. If you're asking the listing agent if they are representing one of the other buyers, and if they have a variable commission in that, you are allowed to ask both of those. And it's something that I need to remind myself to do.
Absolutely. Or even if there's an agent in the same office who's brought in the contract, because potentially it puts you in a different position.
Right. Yeah. And if there's a variable commission, you're definitely at a disadvantage.
Yeah. And that should actually be disclosed in the MLS, but you're correct. It could be part of the negotiation also. All right. I have both sides. I'm going to throw in a point. Right.
Yep.
So how do you ask that? I mean, I'm not even sure I understand.
You ask the listing agent, okay, so they say we have multiple offers. You can say, are you representing any of the buyers in the multiple offer scenario?
Okay.
And they say yes or no. And if they say yes, you say, do you have a variable commission? Or is a variable commission part of your offer?
Because if they say yes, then you're at a disadvantage, as you're saying,
right.
Because all of a sudden that seller's getting an extra point.
Yep. Yep.
So if they say yes, do you walk?
You have to structure your offer a little bit different. You don't walk. You just have a little bit more knowledge going in.
So I'm your buyer, Kelly, and I say, well, why can't you take a point then?
Well, that's, we negotiate a little bit stronger than in this situation. So, I mean, that's up to you whether you want to do that or not.
Would you tell your buyer that's indeed the case, or would you keep that from them?
No, I think you have to tell them that, this is what we know about what the other offers are. You tell them what you know.
Okay, excellent. I'll listen to Kelly all day and Eric for half the day, but this isn't the Kelly and Eric show. So any other thoughts about any of this stuff are totally welcome by anyone except for Josh. So Josh A, that is, Josh Field. Josh Fields still. No, I'm just kidding about everybody. What else? What other thoughts do you all have about this? We're still talking about the buyer. We'll get to the seller in a second. We're still talking about the buyer coming into a multiple offer situation. Any other questions or any other recent anecdotes that through you or you think other people would benefit from?
May I?
Of course, Mr. Schiff.
Well, I've had buyers who say, I don't want to get caught in a multiple offer position, thing all the time. And I tell them, I go, if you don't try, you're going to lose right away. At least put in the offer. Just give them your best offer. I'm not going to charge you to write this offer today. How's that? I'll give you this freebie. I'll write the offer for free, no charge. Just give them your best offer and see what happens. And just walk away. If you don't try, you'll never get it. Who knows?
Yeah. And keep in mind, folks, that there's plenty of stories in all of our offices of people making a good offer, not the highest, but it ended up being the best. And they didn't know it was going to be the best. They thought it was going to be second or third, but because of contingencies, because of the agent that you are, and that other person likes working with, it worked out. And so, Steve's point, you can say it 100 ways. You don't hit a home run if you never go to the plate, right? You just got to go swing sometimes. It's not gonna hurt your buyer to put in an offer, and sometimes it works out. So,
hey, it's like my mother used to say when I started dating. The worst they could say is no, Steve.
Your mom told you that?
Yeah, she said, the worst they could say is no. What?
My mom used to say the worst they can say is yes. Right, in a way. So anyway, okay. Anything else about the buyer side of a multiple offer? Because I have one more thing.
Yeah. So, are you going to talk about the love letter thing at all? I know we've already done that.
Yes, let's bring that up in just a moment. Eric, what else did you have about the buyer? I think what's critical when we represent our buyers is we have to have our market data absolutely perfect. So we can sit down with the buyer, present all the numbers to them, because they're the ones who are going to be the final say in what they are willing to offer. You don't want to be the one caught short in giving advice on the price point. If it's $1.5 million asking price, you don't want to be the one who says $1,495,000 or $1,550,000. They're the ones who need to give you the final number, and that number is going to be based on your professional knowledge and the presentation that you make to them.
It's a lot of pressure that Mr. Flanius is putting on us, but it's good to keep in mind. Okay. Thanks for that, Eric. Kelly, your question in one moment, but I just want to ask, does anyone, as Keith had suggested, front load your buyer consultation with any of this talk about, hey, and because of the price point you're looking at, because of the neighborhood, whatever, because of the way the market is, there's a chance that we will end up in multiple offer situations. This is what it looks like, just so that they don't feel like all of a sudden you're throwing something at them. Does anyone front load with that?
Oh, for sure.
You do?
Yeah.
You do. How many sides did you have last year? 70, 80, something like that?
Or 72 on our team.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're in a pretty active market and you're a pretty active agent. So that makes some sense. What about anyone else? I mean, Kelly makes it sound like a duh. Anyone else?
Well, it's property specific. And if you know your market and you know a property has come on the market, that there will absolutely be multiple brokers working on absolutely immediately. You bring in your buyer and you get them on paper as soon as you can. Otherwise, they will lose out.
Yeah. Look, I'm only asking because I think that no surprises is, as an educator for 20 years, our motto in all my schools is no surprises. Parents shouldn't be surprised. Kids shouldn't be surprised. Teachers shouldn't be surprised. So the more they know ahead of time, even if they forgot it, they heard it, and they won't feel like you're throwing them a curveball in an industry where trust is not high. So I'm 100% with Kelly and with Eric on this of front loading the conversation. Plus, in a little bit of a weird way, and don't take me wrong here, it adds some gas to the tank, I think. When you talk, I'm a basketball coach. If I talk to my kids ahead of time about what overtime feels like and looks like, it puts in their mind the fact that they got to the end of the game tied, that they're still in the game, that they have a chance to win. Like there's something mindset powerful about the very idea of, oh, on this side of it, we might be. And so, I don't know, it might be spin, but I think it paints a little bit of a picture of success, or at least you're getting closer to the finish, to completion, to success, if you talk about that at the front. So thank you for that. Kelly's question is a big one. We've talked about it before, but it's been a while, and these things are always shifty. And Telluride, this was BYT, so I'm curious on how you think about this. A love letter. I remember Karen Bouvet was on one of these calls. I don't know why. She's hardly ever on the calls, but she said, no, don't do it. You're going to put yourself in a liable situation. A love letter that Kelly's talking about, unless you're talking about something else, Kelly, is when you know you are in a situation where there's going to be other offers, and you instruct your client, your buyer, to write a letter to supplement, augment, amplify their reason that that their offer should be accepted. Is that accurate, Kelly? Okay. Yeah, you're on mute, so I don't know why that is. You're still on mute, which is not working for me at all.
Here we go. Here's my thought on it. If you are representing a buyer in a multiple offer scenario, you better have them write a love letter, because you are not putting them in any fair housing danger as a buyer's agent. If you're a listing agent, that's a whole nother thing, because they're at the potential to discriminate. The buyer's agent is not. You're doing everything you can to try to get that home for your buyer. You're representing your buyer. I mean, you take this up with your attorney, but I don't think the buyer's agent or the buyer are at any risk for a fair housing suit in that position. I'm not discriminating.
I had only thought of a love letter as coming from the buyer. Here's why my offer, here's why you should consider my offer.
Yes, but if I'm representing a seller, for example, I tell my sellers up front, here are the risks to love letters. We will likely get these in a multiple offer scenario. Do you or do you not want me to present them to you? Here is why. And then it's up to the seller whether or not they want to see them. I advise them not to look at them. But from a buyer's agent perspective, you're not doing anything wrong by having your buyer write a letter telling how much they love the property.
does it have to focus on that, or does it become a little bit specious if you're talking about why my situation is more?
My opinion is the buyer can write whatever the buyer wants to in it. It's up to the seller and the seller's agent whether or not they review it or accept it.
Interesting. What are some thoughts on that? Whether you've never heard of this before, or whether you've used it before, been bitten, or it's helped you?
I was bitten in a competing situation where the other people wrote the quote heartfelt letter. And so the heartfelt letter was kind of the tipping point. And my buyer was so angry. God.
At what?
He was angry that he lost, because this is a man who doesn't typically lose. And he felt like it was an inside job and so forth. I mean, he never came out and said he was angry at me, and he did stick with me, and we did end up buying something else. And I think ultimately it all worked out for the best, but it was a lesson for me. I'd never been in that situation before, and it blew me away that the heartfelt letter was the tipping point.
And so if that's a lesson, does that mean that you indeed encourage a client to do that since then? Or
I haven't, honestly, it didn't even occur to me, and I'm glad that Kelly brought it up again. So I'm putting it on my list as something to remember to have in my arsenal of when I'm representing a buyer. I just haven't had to deal with it since then. I've been on the seller side.
Yeah, interesting. Wow, the permutations never cease. This is good stuff. Any other thoughts? We're going to talk about the seller for the last 15 minutes, but any other thoughts about the love letter, about any of the buyer stuff before we move to the sellers? Yes, Steve.
You want to see my heartfelt letter that I always look at?
I can't wait.
That's the only heartfelt letter I ever saw work in my entire life. All my sellers always say, "Nice letter. We'll take the better offer." That's what I do.
Derek, question for the group.
Yeah.
Question for the group, since we have all these people on the phone here today. Do you think there's a difference between agent representing a buyer and attaching a cover letter to your offer, just explaining the terms of your offer, and then a difference between that and the love letter from the buyer? And do other agents use a cover letter just kind of further explaining the terms of their offer?
I put a little bit about the details of the offer in the body of the email when I send it over. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
You have the right to personally present your offer. I've done that a couple times, and I've called the agent and just make sure they understand that, hey, this is a good offer. I have a great lender here. They're ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Blah blah blah. You do a little song and dance for them. Hopefully they'll pass it on to the seller.
Well, okay, but wait. When you say song and dance, that makes it sound like it's adding icing when it shouldn't. That's a good thing to do.
Derek, look at this offer. It's a solid offer. I got a buyer who's ready to buy. They don't have a house to sell. They're qualified. They're putting 40% down.
Yep.
I'm doing fast dates. I have my inspection ready to go on Thursday. Today's Tuesday. We're not messing around.
Yeah, that's not a song and dance. That's just
we're gonna make this work, Derek. Okay.
Yep.
So please speak to your sellers. Let's do a deal again. I love working with you.
That's awesome.
Well, and I want to add to that to say that you don't know where, at least in this market, where the seller is. So the seller may be out of state, and they may be using e-sign or whatever. So you need to put everything in writing with the cover letter to make it easy for the other agent to either copy paste or forward it straight on to their seller. So I think you want to write a really nice, succinct cover note stating the strength of the offer and in simple terms. And then I like to get on the phone with the agent because I want to chat with that agent and talk about it. And you learn a lot when you have that conversation. Either they're excited about your offer, or they're lukewarm, or they're really reticent. You know, you just learn a lot. So there's a lot of feedback there, and you can already start selling that agent based on how they respond as well. So I think you have to go at it from every angle you can.
There's a lot of agents
That's
who
why you
know
have to talk
way
to them.
more about their seller's situation than they ever should. So
Right.
it tells you a lot.
Say that again, Kelly. I missed the
I
first
said
part.
there are an awful lot of agents who will tell you way more about their seller's situation, motivating factors, etc. If you have a conversation with them. I'll take
And that's a good thing.
all day long.
That's a good
Exactly. They'll spill the beans oftentimes. I mean,
Yep.
one or two of them are close to the vest, but most of them will spill the beans, and it's great.
Mhm.
Right. Again, the C word, communication. It's what this is all about, really, for me. So, okay, good stuff. We pissed Steven off enough to get him out of here. Now we can have some open conversation. No, I'm kidding. So let's talk about the seller side real quick. And I don't know why it's gone so far with the buyers, but the seller. Who's got a dog? We're representing the seller, and talk me through that. Do you front load with the seller? Do you talk about multiple offer situations? Who's got a strategy for the seller?
I wish it happened often enough around here that it would require me to do that. I have two brokers who are clients from Los Angeles, and I actually called them recently because of my transaction. And you know, they do it all the time. They just expect multiple offers. They expect the deal to go, 10% over the ask price. It's just all built into their process. For us, it's pretty rare that we see multiple offers here.
So you don't worry about it too much.
I don't worry about it too much. I knew that the unit that I was putting on the market was going to get hammered by brokers. So the seller and I had discussed it. So they were totally anticipating what happened.
If I'm the seller, Mr. Felenius, I'm going to be like, well, if we're going to get multiple offers, why is the price what it is? Why aren't we putting it 100,000 higher? Come on.
Because the price was based on a very, very detailed Coldwell Banker Distinctive Properties 15-page listing presentation that analyzed the market in great detail. And when we priced it, we did price it right. It was just the demand in the market for that particular product was just very strong.
Okay. So you don't feel like I got short whatever? No. Okay. Thanks. Because that's come up in our office, like, did you underprice it? We had an agent put something on, and in 2 days she had 3 or 4 offers. I think, Pam, I'm talking about Jeannie's Stonehenge, and everybody's like, did you underprice it? Well, no, it's just priced right. It's a good unit. So, but how do you talk your sellers through that? Eric just gave us a good insight. Maybe I don't need to ask the question, but I'm trying to.
It's all about the numbers. I mean, whether we're dealing with buyers or sellers, it's our knowledge and expertise in the market that ultimately drives the deal. So I definitely did not feel badly that I had priced it correctly and I generated the interest that I did.
What makes a seller happier? A quicker sale or a higher price sale that takes longer?
So Josephine and I sold our house in town a few years ago, and we put it on the market at what I felt was the correct number. And we had 47 steps from our garage up to our kitchen, living, dining room, vertical steps. And I said to Josephine when we listed it that we needed a young mountain climber to buy our house. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, we had a deal on it, and it was purchased by a couple who own a climbing shop in Moab. And she thought for sure that we had priced it too low, and I felt that we had done exactly what we were supposed to do. It's all in the numbers. That's all we do is study and analyze and know what our numbers are.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, though, in terms of time or price, that's entirely personal. So for one person, they can wait for their price, and somebody else needs out, and that's where an all cash 10-day close can sometimes get a better price for the buyer. But in terms of the seller's preference, it's entirely up to them.
Yeah. It's probably in the weeds. So let's back up. And thanks for that, Pam. Let's back up and make sure that we can all talk our sellers through an escalation clause. Okay. So you've just brought on this nice house for $350. It's in a good neighborhood. It's not the most beautiful home, but it's solid. It's got good bones, as they say. You've prepared your seller that at this price point, with this market, there's a chance we're going to get multiple offers. And sure enough, you get a couple. So someone tell me what that looks like when you get 2 offers coming in. How do you communicate with your seller so that they're staying abreast of the situation, but they don't know everything? I don't even know. Someone tell me.
I want Kelly to talk.
I do too.
I was like, I'm the only one that's talking. Somebody else talk.
Jen Peterson, are you on this? I'm sure you've had a couple of multiple offers seller situations, given the fact that you were one of the top 3 sides salespeople in the company last year. Anything? Kimberly, I know you've brought up. Michelle, come on. Who's got it? I'm your lost soul of a seller. Someone, I don't know what to do. There's 2 offers. Sweet, take them both.
It's all about education.
You sell my house twice?
It's from the very beginning, when you sit down with a client, it's all about educating them. You educate them on the market. You educate them on what their house may or may not be worth. You educate them on the process. You tell them this likely will happen based on the inventory that we've seen in the market that I've shown you as part of your market analysis. There is a gap in this market in this price point. We may get multiple offers. Here's what that could or could not look like. And you have full control over that, Mr. Seller. So, you can choose to ask for highest and best. You can choose to review offers as they come in on a case-by-case basis. You put the control back in your seller's court. That way they don't feel like they're out of control in the process.
So I'll be honest with you, Kelly. I'm your client right now. This is the first house I've ever sold, right? And so I'd rely on you to. I mean, both these offers look good. This one's a little higher, but this one's a little shorter in terms of time, and the cash seems a little bit more fluid. So I don't know. What do you think? Do you think they would compete?
Well, sure. I mean, we could always put it out to them and see. Just say highest and best and see what they come back with. Is there
a chance I lose them both if we enter into a competing escalation clause?
Potentially, yes.
So maybe that's not a good idea.
I think in this market, most buyers recognize that is a possibility, that they may be competing. Occasionally, we do run across a buyer who does not want to compete, and that's totally their prerogative to be able to do that. I think it's in your best interest to see if we can get the highest price for your property. You hired me to get you the highest price in the least amount of time. That's what we're going to do.
Okay. And you think doing the elevator clause, or what did you call it? The
acceleration or escalation, whatever.
Oh, right. That was just me being silly. You think that's the best way to do that?
Well, it's up to the buyer whether or not they put that in their contract. So by going back to the buyers and asking for highest and best, they may put this clause into their contract. They may not too. They may just come back with what they're willing to pay as the highest price. We won't know that until we go back to them.
I see. So I don't determine whether there's an escalation clause.
Yes.
Excellent. But how am I in the driver's seat here? Because we make the decision on what the best offer is, right?
Right. It's based on your scenario. So you told me that you already have purchased a house in California and you're ready to get out of here. Your moving ban is scheduled in 2 weeks and you're ready to go. So the first offer that we've received is full price, closing in 2 weeks. That looks to me like it lines up pretty well with your time frame.
Right.
The second offer we received, is this. Do you want to go back and ask for highest and best at this point?
Yeah. Did I tell you the name of the van company I hired?
No, you didn't.
It's Go.
Okay.
Yeah, Van Go.
There you go.
Yeah, good. So my thoughts on an offer that only brings in 2 offers or 2 buyers is I encourage the seller to respond to the first offer that comes in based on their wants and needs, what their price is, what their timing is. And clearly what we all dream of is having two buyers who are interested in the property, because more often than not, the number is driven up pretty quickly. And what I keep it as transparent as possible with both brokers, and somehow it's easier to go to the first contract that came in with a strong counter. If they don't accept it, then I encourage the buyers to, or the sellers to, take that same counter offer and bring it to the second buyer. Part of the reason is I like to try to hold on to both buyers. I don't want to lose them because we've just done a highest and best. An escalation clause in that case doesn't necessarily generate the highest offer either. If it's just $500 more than the other offer, you know, that may not generate the deal that you ultimately want. So I like having I like working both sides. And the fair way to do it strategically is to go to the first offer that comes in.
Okay. All right. We've got about a minute left, and Mark is getting bored, and that's a good sign that we need to wrap things up. So here's a couple things that I want you to know before we hang up. I want you to put in your head who in your office, what broker, what agent in your office, if it's not you, and even if it is you, it should be someone else, can you go to with these questions? Because this mastermind isn't going to get you able to deal with every single multiple offer or escalation clause that you confront. So is there someone in your office that you trust, that you know would take the time to walk you through this, role play it, look at the contracts, etc.? Whether you're a first-year agent or have been doing this for 15 years, to do this on your own, I think it's just super complicated. My head hurts right now in really good ways, but I don't think anyone should do this without vetting it with someone. So I hope you have someone in your office you can do that with. Okay. Second thing I want to suggest is something else. Crap. What was it? So we're all looking for listings in our markets right now. Like inventory is down in Sun Valley and it's down in Telluride and Bozeman. Your office has just a few residential listings. You know, you can use this stuff, whether you're involved in these or not. You can use these things as gas for the tank for your clients who are sitting there going, or for a farming campaign or something. You can talk about the fact that there are multiple offers happening in this market right now. And if you are going to sit and let the market go by, in 6 months, you might be kicking yourself. Now, you're not trying to make stuff up. These things are real. The markets are active right now. They need more inventory. Talking about multiple offers is a beautiful way to leverage, to get potential sellers to get off their hiney and put their home on the market. So use this very subject here, whether you've had firsthand experience recently or not. Use someone's experience in your office to just juice your inventory, to juice your own activity as a real estate agent. We get caught up in the fact that, well, I haven't had any sales, so what do I have to promote? You can take any listing that's sold in your market, whether it was in your office or not, and you can send a postcard out about it. Guess what? This condo in this development just sold, and 4 others have in the past 6 months. Are you ready to sell yours? It doesn't have to have anything to do with CBDP or Josh Anderson or Mark. Like, you can take a sale and go take a picture of the thing so you don't rip off someone else's photo and farm it. Farm that condo development. Okay? So use all of this activity that we're talking about to help. If you're indeed looking to increase your listings or increase your activity, use it. It's all available for you. So don't let that thought escape you, even though we focus on our own sales and our own listings. So that's what I would say to you. I can't appreciate thank enough as those of you that contributed, and all of you did in one way or another, but it's just great to be able to have these masterminds and have people say stuff and argue and gesticulate and spit at the screen, and you don't even have to duck because it's all digital. I love that, so I appreciate that. Keep up the good work. We are in our last month of session 5, so you should have one more one-on-one session next week, and then we'll have a final Todd Conklin led Mastermind the last week of March, I believe. So that's what the rest of this session looks like. So make sure, even though there's only a few of us on the call, that if you need something out of your coach for their last session, if there's something that you really need to talk about, that you front load with them so that they can help you as the session winds down. So that's what I have to say. Thanks a ton, everybody, for your thoughts and comments and all of that good stuff, especially Kelly, Pam, Steve, and Eric, and Mark, your contributions. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great Tuesday afternoon, okay? Okay, bye-bye.